Dear gracious Lord, we thank you for this day, and Father, we're thankful for the coolness and the showers. Well, I know there are areas that got way too much water, and I just pray for them as they deal with flooding, and hopefully use sense and care in the way that they move. Father, as we come to you this morning, I pray that you open our hearts to your word. I pray that we might glean those things that will encourage us and build us up, and Father, help us to serve you more faithfully, as well as make us faithful in our service. I pray that you bless the sick and the ill, those that are suffering. Father, you know their needs, and I just pray that your hands wrap around them to give them the things that they need, whether it's comfort or strength or healing or all of it. And I pray, Father, that we might always be open to you and ask you into our situations and into our life. Again, bless our study. Bless this day. We ask this in your name. Amen. Okay. We've been talking about the church. We've gone through prophecy. We've gone through some different scriptures that describe the church, if you want to say etymologically, that is by the meaning of the word, just called out body. And you know, when you stop and you think about that definition, and that literally is the definition of the word church. As we talked about, we're called to be holy, we're called to be God's people, we're called to obey God. And so when you talk about the English word church, it has nothing to do with the biblical definition. And so it's no wonder when you talk about churches, you're talking in a human standpoint, not from God's standpoint. We talked about the church as the body the last 2 weeks, and how each part, not just a part, but each part is supposed to function good. And when it does, the church builds itself up. We become like the head of Christ, Ephesians 5. There are a lot of different pictures given. And today we're going to talk about the church as the house of God. I say house and temple, that we're going to split those, although in one sense they're kind of identical. Because when you think of the tabernacle, and then later when the temple was built by Solomon and then rebuilt after the Babylonian and Syrian captivities, and then it was destroyed again and then rebuilt again, and then Herod built it up differently. It was still the place in the Jewish mind where God dwelt on the mercy seat and the Ark of the Covenant. So as long as you were in Jerusalem, well, before Jerusalem, as long as you have the Ark, you know, leading you, and then when they camped, the Ark was in the center and everybody faced inward to the house of God. They could see the light by day, the cloud by day, the light by night. They knew God was there. And of course the idea was, if you're with God, you can't lose, which is a very biblical concept. Read Romans 8, that whole chapter. You know, can't be separated from the love of God. We're more than conquerors. If God is for us, who can be against us? And you can go through all kinds of good stuff there. In Psalm 27 and verse 4, David says, "One thing I have asked of the Lord, that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life." When you think of those words, you got to realize it's exactly what God designed and wanted. Again, there are all kinds of passages you can look up where God says to Israel, and then he says later to Christians, "I will be your God, you will be my people, I will dwell or abide or live with you, and you will dwell, abide, or live with me." And then you go to Christ talking about the mansion that he's made, and it's already prepared. And you say, why would God prepare for a house that he doesn't know how many people are going to be in it? Why would he? The answer is real simple. He knows how many people are going to be in it. Those who answer the call to be a Christian. And God looks at all time, infinitely. He doesn't have the issues we do. We can look back. And even sometimes we look back, we don't look accurately because we look through prejudice or lack of knowledge. If you don't study history, you'll repeat it. I don't know who said that, but it's true. We can't look ahead any further than what God shows us is what's ahead. That's our hope, is built on what we're looking forward to. We look back at what God said and see he's truthful, so we can look forward with that same confidence, knowing that he doesn't change. So when David says, I want to dwell in the house, the one thing he asked of God, let me dwell in your house. God's already provided the means. That was Christ. So we have a house that's prepared. We have a place. We have the means. All we lack is the full attainment of that. In 2 Peter, I forgot, my mind's messed up this morning. Anyway, in 2 Peter, Peter says, the salvation ready to be revealed. Now, what does that mean? Hasn't salvation already come? Yeah, it came at the cross, the resurrection. Again, Isaiah 53, 500,000 passages, the whole Bible, basically. So when Peter talks about the salvation ready to be revealed, it's the same thing the Hebrew writer talks about. There is a rest that remains. We just haven't entered into it. And we won't until the day of judgment. So it is that house already built, already determined by God, already being filled by the people, us, who answer the call that God has given and become children of God. In Psalm 127:1, we mentioned this when we were talking earlier one Sunday. Unless the house build the Lord, it won't stand. So that's why I say, when you look at the biblical concept of the church being the called out of God, all these things you see around you that use the word church won't stay. They're not built on the truth. They're not built on the prophecy. They're not built on the blood of Christ. They're built on false hopes, men's interpretations and perversions and whatever else that comes in. So, Proverbs 24 in verse 7. Oops, I get my Bible to turn. Solomon says, wisdom is too high for a fool. Oops. Oh, sorry. I went to 24 verse 4. 27. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm goofed up. I lost my passage. I wrote down the wrong verse. Anyway, in Proverbs somewhere, it talks about how that the house is built by wisdom. And again, if you go back to the first chapter of Proverbs, wisdom and understanding begin with the fear of God.
Verse 21:3.
21:3. Man, I don't know how I got 24:7. Thank you.
Chapter 24, verse 3 and 4.
Okay, thank you. Chapter 24, verse 3. Oh, well. So that brings me, at least, to the idea of Matthew 27:24. And in Matthew 7, Christ talks about the wise man and the foolish man. We learned this about that high in Sunday school, the little song, the wise man built his house upon the rock. Hey, I still remember it. That is weird. but that's the story. Now, if a wise man builds his house, and as Proverbs says, the house is built by wisdom, think about it for a minute. I mean, obviously the point of a rock is it's solid, as Christ taught, when the rains came and the winds blew, the house stood solid. It didn't bother it. When you build on sand with shifts, and I don't know if you ever, I used to walk a lot in Oregon, and I'd walk on the beach, and I would go 4 or 5 miles down and back. We had a bunch of young people come up and help us from the church that was helping support us in Mesquite, Texas. And one big old guy went with me on my walk one day. Well, when we walked down, and we're just talking, and I'm not paying any attention, I do it all the time. He obviously didn't. I got a 24-year-old wimp. Big wimp, but a wimp. He couldn't take it. We were walking where the tide was going out, so the sand's packed. As we came back, the tide was coming in. We'd gone about 4 miles, and he was sweating, and I was really concerned we're gonna have to call somebody to come get him. But when we started back, we had to get up where the sand was loose, and that's a lot harder walking. You slip and you slide, and you understand what Christ is saying. And when you build on sand, it's going to come down. And you'll notice, or maybe you haven't noticed, but you should notice, when Christ talks about the foolish man, and the word fool in Greek literally means empty. So it means you're not using the brain you got, or you don't got any brains. I'll beg up to that one. Anyway, he says, the house fell when the rains beat against it. How does he describe the fall? What's the one word he uses when the house fell? He says, was the fall thereof. Great. When I think of a great fall, and I watched a video just the other day, there's some house up in North Carolina that washed into the ocean again where erosion was going. It's total destruction. I mean, it just means, it's flat on the ground. So if you're empty-headed and you build a house on the wrong foundation, it's gonna fall. And when it falls, it's gonna be total. When you think of a wise builder, if you're gonna build a house today, you get a contractor that knows what he's doing. Most houses today, almost anywhere you build them anymore, are slab foundations, which means they'll lay what they call bunker boards, which you see these little boards kind of squared up somewhere on a lot. That's where they're starting to dig the foundation. And they'll dig 18 to 24 inches down, pour what they call the footing. Once they get the footing done, they spread it full of sand, and the plumbers, the electricians come in, lay all their stuff that's going to go under the foundation down, and they'll make sure all the measurements are right, hopefully. And then they pour this concrete, and that's the foundation of the house. Then you build your walls, put it all together, they anchor them down. Some places where they have hurricanes, they add extra metal hangers and strengtheners where you have wood join wood to make it where it'll withstand more problems. Works. If you don't build them like that, particularly in Oklahoma where you got tornadoes, doesn't take much wind to blow one over. If it's built real solid, it might stand it. Built of brick or something like that, concrete, might even do better. So wise builder means that you take care how you build. And that care begins with a foundation. Now, if you look at 1 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter, verse 11, starting verse 10. He's talked about in verse 9, he says, "For you are God's fellow workers, you are God's field, you are God's building. According to the grace of God given to me," this is Paul, "like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation, and someone else is building upon it. Let each one take care how he builds upon it. For no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now if anyone builds on the foundation with gold or silver or precious stones or wood or hay or straw, each one's work will be made manifest, for the day will disclose it." And obviously the day is the day of judgment, because that's when our building and our lives, we stand before God, get a count of. So that's why you have that phrase back in the middle part of verse 10. Let each one take care how he builds. That's the same as going to the body parts in Ephesians, where each part working effectively builds the body up. I mean, you got a house, you've got carpenters, you've got concrete workers, you've got electricians, you've got all kinds of stuff anymore. Data technicians and refrigeration, heating, air, all that kind of stuff. So he says, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. Now notice verse 14. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he'll receive a reward. So when the storm comes, or in this case, as he says, the fire, the trials of our lives and how we've lived stands, you receive the reward. If you built your house good, the storm comes and it stays up, yeah, you might have to repair a few things, or do a little painting or whatever. No biggie. You still got a house. But he says, verse 15, if anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. Now what's he talking about as far as the work? You remember what the work of the church is? We talked about this last week. Two things. Yeah. Teaching the gospel, the Great Commission, or the work of the ministry. That's the way Paul put it in Ephesians. And then the what? The edifying of the church. And again, edify puts into this idea of building a house, because the word edify literally means to build up. So if we as members of the body, parts of the house, or builders of the house, look at the foundation we have, which is Christ, which he's talked about here, and we build on it, but some of what we build when the storm comes falls down, doesn't mean what? Have I failed as a builder? How do I know that this is not talking about me personally failing as building? Oh, come on. It's obvious. What does he say? If anyone, if the work anyone is built on the foundation survives, if anyone's work is burned up. Okay, if it's burned up, what is that? What comes previous to being burned up? His work. He's a builder. He's been building. And if you look at, again, go back up to verse 12, we build with gold, silver, precious stones. Fire don't affect that. Matter of fact, fire actually reveals some precious stones. But then he says what? Wood, hay, and stubble. That doesn't work very well in a fire, But you build with the materials you have. Again, not all of us, if you remember we talked about the body, not all parts are the same. When we talk about our physical bodies, we talk about the heart and the brain as being two necessity organs. Well, guess what? The heart's no good if the lungs don't get the oxygen out of the air into your bloodstream, and it won't do any good there unless the blood vessels get it to the heart. And you can go through all the mechanics of how our body functions as we understand it. So again, every part has to do its part. But as Paul pointed out, he says at one time, he says what? I plant, Apollos water, and then what? God gives the increase. We have to do our part. We have to be a part of the body, functioning in the body. We have to be a builder and build with what we have, the gifts that God gives us. And they're not all the same. So obviously, when trials come, maybe people we've taught never obeyed the gospel. Maybe some of them obey it and then they what? Fall away. The parable of the sower, the planter. You got good soil, you got rocky soil, you got bad soil. And our job is what? To plant and build. So if we're doing that, even if we see people we've taught and prayed about be lost, could go back into the world or stay in the world and just live in their own way, obviously we're going to suffer loss. I mean, people I know that were strong Christians now that are totally against God or living in a fake religion, just kind of haphazardly going through, feeling good about themselves, but they have nothing to do with pleasing God, makes me ill. Because some of that's my own family members. And I work on that in a lot of ways, and maybe too much, and maybe I'm pushing them further away, but God's word is what it is. It's that sharp sword that cuts between. And as he points out here, even if we build, we may suffer loss. And that's never fun. I've done a lot of woodworking, furniture, I've done work on some of the jobs I've had doing building, and I messed up. And it showed up real quick. Even had a guy that'd been a plumber for 30 years. We laid everything out, had it set, they poured the concrete. Guess what? 2 toilets were 6 inches to the wrong place. So if you put the divider in, the toilet would have been split by the divider, for privacy. And so we had to chisel out, and luckily that's happened before, and that you just dig down in the concrete, and you move over, you put this little fitting that moves it over where you need it to be. And so it wasn't a huge deal, but it was costly because that was labor and time that my boss had to pay for because we messed up. But it's fixable. But anyway, he talks here the idea that as our work may be a murder, we're still safe. Why am I still safe even though my work's not what I want it to be? Yeah, because I'm not responsible for that person. I planted or I've watered or I've done whatever I could, and again, they have to answer the call. I can tell them they've been called, I can show they've been called, I can tell them how they've been called, to what, how to get there, everything that God has shown me, but they still have to respond. But my part is I need to do what I know to do. I need to build. I need to be that functioning body part. Again, all kinds of different pictures show the same thing. And I need to work so that that body of Christ grows to the head, who is Christ. Again, going to John, I need to work that, as Christ said, that Christ and the body may be one as God and I are one. No division. 1 Corinthians 1 Corinthians 1, you go to about verse 16, Paul talks about the division of Corinth. That, man, that shouldn't happen. There's going to be some loss in that building if they don't change. So, as a Christian, if I'm helping build, if I see something starting to fall, what? Man, we can go in and strengthen it up, or try to strengthen it up, and try to build it up, and try to reinforce it. And face it, everybody needs reinforcing at times. Preachers, elders, deacons, pew sitters. No, I don't mean that negatively. But whatever, you know. And so, when you look at the idea of that house, Mark 3:25, Christ said what? A house divided can't stand. And sometimes as a builder, we do more division than building. Another simple example from work. I was putting hangers for ductwork. Same company, we had our plumbers. And in one section, you had this big metal duct, I think it was like 3 foot by 2 foot. And we hung it. The next day, we came in, there was a hole drilled on this side of the ductwork, a hole drilled on this side of the ductwork, and a copper water line running right through it. That was our own plumbers, guys I work with. So the tenor, the next day, when the plumbers came in, their line was cut, there was new ductwork put in. That happened 3 different times. Before the boss finally found out about it and came in and said, hey, come on guys, you can run the water line down. The ductwork you couldn't do much with, but to put a hole, you can't do that. There's all kinds of things that says that's wrong. So, if we don't build on the rock, if we don't build, we don't put the energy and the planning and the work in, then if the fires come, it's not only going to be the work that's lost, it's going to be me because I never did it. Just like again with the human body, when a part fails or messes up, it lets you know. If it's a paper cut, it hurts. If it's a toothache, it hurts. If it's a heart attack, it hurts. Or stomach ache or whatever, and we do what we need to do to fix it. We go to somebody that knows what to do, hopefully. And building the house, again, you got to put it up right. So you got to, if you don't know what the code is, I worked for a heat and air company when I first got out of trade school. Our office and most of our work was in Midwest City. And at that time, that was before a state license. Well, we did work in Lacombe Park, Hara, Oklahoma City, 6 or 8 different towns. And you had to have a license in each town. $50 a shot. So my license, if I had gotten one for every area we worked in, would have been about $900 a month. I'm making 60 cents an hour. No, I made $1.60 an hour at that point. Big time. Didn't work. We need to understand that the house God builds is one that keeps us in his house. In Ephesians, the 2nd chapter, come on. Yeah, here we are. If you start in verse 20, well, go back to verse 19, starting in the sentence. He says, so then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens of the saints and members of the household of God, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Christ Jesus himself being the cornerstone, in whom the whole structure, being joined together, grows unto the holy temple in the Lord, In him also you are built together into a dwelling place for God by the Spirit. Now there he ties all kinds of things into one sentence. You know, we start with being built on the, why are we built on the apostles and prophets? What does he mean by that?
They were taught to bring it to us.
Yeah, they are the ones that God began to reveal himself to man through. So their teachings are what we rely on. And they are through Christ. He says, here he says, Christ being the chief cornerstone. What do you think of when you think of a cornerstone?
Foundation.
Huh?
Good foundation.
Yeah, foundation. But normally when we talk about a cornerstone, I mean, even on this building, we got a little
Gives you
rock
the-
right here that says, what, Church of Christ?
Right
And
measure.
I think that came from when y'all were on 8th and Main, a lot of years ago. And I know that because I remember when it was over there. We usually think of a cornerstone they put on a building that says when it was erected. Usually some of them have architects and the dates and maybe even a time capsule put in behind it. Cornerstone in ancient times, or even in some parts today, was a stone that was cut to exact standards. I mean, it was as perfect as they could get it. And they would set that down and then take all the measurements off of it and build everything from that as the starting point. So when you talk about Christ being the cornerstone, he is the exact measurement, or as the Hebrew writer says, every way like us and yet still God. Everything fits together because of him. And you notice as he goes from a building that grows into a holy temple. So our building is not static. It's always growing. There's additions every day. And that's people coming to Christ. And they come because what? Each part is doing what it should. Building, encouraging, whatever. If any part of that messes up, what happens?
It's off.
Huh?
It's off.
Yeah, again, some of that building might have to be replaced. Because when the test comes, it fails. Just like if you're building a house in any place, you got to follow the code, city codes, state codes, of the electrical, plumbing, all the stuff, to make sure that that house meets the standards that's set by the city you live in. And they're all different from cities. But anyway, the purpose is that you don't have fires or failures or floods because of some idiot that didn't know what he was doing. So they standardize all that. God standardized what he demands. 1 John, all through the book, if you love God, you what?
Keep my commandments.
Keep his commandments. What defined the Jew?
Circumcision.
Well, circumcision, and then what? Yeah, the law. The law told you what you needed to be as a Jew, because if you followed that, then you weren't like anybody else. Because everybody else, for the most part, believed in a bunch of gods or no gods at all. And it's no different when you take that picture, as the Hebrew writer says, as a shadow of the true things now, the church. And again, you'll notice he says here in Ephesians 2, in him you also are built together into a what? A dwelling place, or a house, or an abiding place of God. So that's where the temple picture kind of takes over. You know, there are a lot of things you could talk about, examples from the physical world. And if you look back at Isaiah 56 and verse 7, the writer talks about how that God's house is a house of prayer. That's quoted over in Matthew 21, verse 13. Christ applies it, you know, when he went in and started scattering the money changers and the tables. So as a house of prayer, that just means what? What is prayer, basically? In real simple terms.
Prayer, talking to God.
Huh?
Talking to God.
Yeah, talking to God. We may just talk about what's going on, ask Him for some direction. We may ask Him for help. We may ask Him for something we need. We might be like Christ in the garden, fervently praying for a real solution. Hey, what do you know? I actually turned it on. I still got 5 minutes. And I use them, so don't worry about that. It just, all those things come together. And the fact that we have a one mansion with many rooms, again, John 14, and it's ready for us. And the many rooms is the many parts of the body and the many builders of the house. And again, it cannot stand division. Now, that doesn't mean in every aspect of what we know about God that we're going to agree. I mean, there are people that take some passages out of the Old Testament and say, this is where the devil came from, and blah, blah, blah. I'm not so sure they're right. Matter of fact, I argued with a prominent preacher back when I was in college, and he put me in my place, and I thanked him for it. Doesn't matter. Those, you know, there are what I call in the Bible a lot of curiosities, things that are spoken of, doesn't have anything to do with salvation, but it makes me wonder. When Christ was crucified, you know, the sky darkened, the temple was torn in, the curtain of the temple was torn in two. There were people in the graves that came out and walked around the earth. What happened to them when it was all over? Tell me that. That's a curiosity that drives me nuts. But it is. Don't matter. Who cares? I mean, really, you know. Why did I even think of that? Because I'm stupid. But we won't go there either. There are just so many things that we could worry and fret about, but it has nothing to do with us fulfilling the work or the task that God's given. You know, I think one of our biggest challenges is, as a Christian, besides preaching and teaching and encouraging, finding out what abilities God has given us and using them. And using them to the max. Developing others. You know, in 1 Corinthians, 11, 12, 13, 14, he talks about spiritual gifts. I think it's in the 14th chapter, he talks about how we ought to desire prophecy. That means we can have it if we ask God, right? Ask and you'll get it. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door shall be open. Maybe God will give us some gifts we don't even know we have, or maybe we don't have them yet. Or maybe we haven't discovered them to use them and put them to benefit. I didn't know I could build furniture until I started doing it. Now my whole house is full of live furniture, and I can say mine in a real way. And some of it falls apart too. That was the early stuff. You know, but I'm just saying, when you build, if I only know carpentry work, guess what? I can learn, and if I want, I could get an electrician's license or a plumber's license or a HVAC license, and I can do the whole thing by myself. Do I want to build a log home, brick home, wood home, frame home, concrete home, brick home? You know, depends. So you get what you need to build with. If I want to build something permanent, I'm definitely not going to use wood, hay, or straw. So I'm going to look for rock and concrete and whatever. God's given us all those abilities. But again, it takes everyone doing whatever building they can build, no matter how insignificant. Because again, if you go back to Paul talking about planting, Apollos watering, God giving the increase, he says, me and Apollos are what? Anybody know?
Basically, co-work.
Nothing. You want to be a nothing? If not, then maybe you got an ego problem. Because we have to become nothing to God to be a child of God. Because everything we have is based on Christ. You know, Galatians 2:20, no longer what? I that liveth. Oh, guess what? That means I just became a nothing. That Christ may live in me. That's when we're an effective builder. That's when we're an effective part of the body, doing what we can to grow it, to nurture it, to bring it to the fruition, that the salvation ready to be revealed, that entering, standing before God and hearing, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter into the rest prepared for you. That's a church. That's the people that make up the church. That's the builders. That's the body parts. Some good looking ones, some ugly ones. Yeah, I know. I lie a lot. You know, so when you look at the house, there are a million other things you could talk about in regard to what is a house. When you talk about your house, what are you talking about? The building? Normally not. It's just the place you live. So that includes your family, the problems, the good things, the bad things. You know, my air conditioner works, mine doesn't. Whatever. But you can fix it. And if you can't fix it, what? Go to God. That's that prayer thing again. Ask and you'll receive. James says, if any man ask wisdom, ask of God who what? Giveth to all men liberally. You won't lack. You just got to ask. And if you ask and then use that knowledge to build, again, Matthew 27, a wise man builds on solid foundation. Or go back to Proverbs, a house is built by wisdom. Wisdom comes from God. You don't think you got it? Ask for it. You'll get it. May not be the same as what I got, may not be the same as what somebody else has, but it's what you need. Because we all have different gifts. The body and a house has different needs. If you just build have a mason build a house, you're gonna have a bunch of brick or concrete. No electric, no plumbing, nothing else. Add in the other parts, then you got a house that you want. Next week, right, I got 1 minute. Next week we're going to talk about, we'll move from the house picture to the temple concept. And again, Ephesians, that pastor read Ephesians 2, ties the house and the temple as one. And so we'll just kind of look at, when you talk about a house, you just think about a dwelling. You talk about the temple, you think about God. So the temple aspect just kind of brings God more into focus with the house concept, but a lot of similarities. So anyway, we'll do that next week if nothing changes, and I'll shut up because it's time. At least I broke